22 minutes before 9 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. It's time for NewsBites. This is the part of the morning where we take the news and we shorten it. We give you just enough information so you get the gist of the story. We cut to the chase, get to the point, and get you on your way so you don't have to spend all day listening to the radio to get your news. And it gives us an opportunity to put news back in News Talk. And we will give you, when we have it, the information, in other words, the resource that we get the news story from, so you can look it up yourself. And Robin and I will go, what do you call it? Tag team. Back and forth. The first one comes from the New York Times. Target has confirmed that it was investigating a security breach involving stolen credit card and debit card information for 40 million of its retail customers. Oh, you had the story too? Yeah, okay. Target's announcement came one day after a security blogger, Brian Krebs, first reported the breach. In a statement, Target confirmed that criminals gained access to its customer information on November 27th, the day before Thanksgiving and just ahead of one of the busiest shopping days of the year, and maintained access through December 15th. Target said it had confirmed that its online customers were not affected by the breach, which appears to have been isolated to the point-of-sale systems in Target's retail stores. Target said the cyber criminals had accessed customer names, credit or debit card numbers, expiration dates, and the 3-digit security codes for 40 million customers who had shopped in its stores.
Wow. This is from the Florida News Network. It's out of Tallahassee. High schools are racking up higher grades in Florida. State officials have finished completing all the scores from last school year, and Education Commissioner Pam Stewart says that almost half of the compiled scores ended up that almost half of the compiled scores from the schools ended up with a grade of A. 82% of our high schools made either A's or B's, Stewart said, and they've done this while it was a little more difficult this year to achieve the higher grades. Stewart says they set a record for the number of A's this year. 281 high schools will be getting bonus money from the state because they earned an A or improved a grade. At the opposite end of the scale, there are 15 schools with a grade of D and 8 that ended up with a failing grade. You can find rankings for your local schools at the Department of Education website, www.fldoe.org.
And a follow-up on the story you had yesterday, Robin, about the blind man whose dog saved him from a subway well. Enough donations have been raised to allow a blind man to keep the aging guide dog that went onto the subway tracks with him when the man lost consciousness and fell from a station platform. The spirit of giving Christmas exists in New York, as a tearful Cecil Williams said yesterday, calling the outpouring of money and goodwill a miracle. It's a time to rejoice, Williams said. Michelle Breyer, a spokeswoman for Guiding Dogs for the Blind, which provides working dogs for free but cannot cover retired dogs' expenses, said this morning that as of right now, Williams' plans to keep the dog named Orlando as a pet after Orlando retires and Williams gets a new working dog early next year. Breyer added that it's an emotional time and the organization will support whatever path he ultimately takes. The family that raised Orlando has said it would be thrilled to take in Orlando if Williams is unable to care for 2 dogs. So either way, Orlando has a home either with the blind man he's been with since he was let go from the trainer or going back to the trainer. That's a cool follow-up story.
Oh, yeah. 2/3 of Americans in a new ABC News Washington Post poll support increasing the minimum wage, rejecting arguments that doing so could encourage layoffs and reflecting majority sentiment that current federal government policies favor the wealthy. Those who support a higher minimum wage even have a recommended level. The average response in this group is $10.25 per hour, very close to the $10.10 proposal endorsed by Barack Obama and now before the U.S. Senate, reported by ABC.
And this story is from the Associated Press. Former NBA star Dennis Rodman arrived in North Korea this morning to meet leader Kim Jong-un and put a the finishing touches on plans to bring 12 ex-NBA players to Pyongyang for a January 8th exhibition game marking the leader's birthday. Rodman said the game is on track despite the recent execution of Kim's uncle in a dramatic political purge. Rodman's visit comes less than a week after North Korea announced the execution of Jang Song-thaek, an unprecedented fall from grace for one of the most powerful figures in the country. Jang's execution sparked speculation by foreign analysts over the future of the Kim regime, but officials in Pyongyang say Jang's removal has not caused any instability. Rodman's visit, should it proceed uneventfully, could be a sign that Kim is firmly in charge. Rodman told the Associated Press in a brief interview at his Pyongyang hotel that he was undaunted by the recent political events. Holy mackerel.
Is this the end of the line for the lead bullet? Regulations and bans force switch to green ammunition. The Army's new round replaces the current M855 5.56 millimeter cartridge that has been used by U.S. troops since the early 1980s. The Army claims the M855A1 is more dependable, a more consistent performer, improves accuracy, and moves faster. When the last bullet-producing lead smelter closes its doors on December the 31st, it will mark a major victory for those who say lead-based ammunition pollutes the environment. But others warn green bullets will cost more, drive up copper prices, and do little to help conservation. The bid to ban lead bullets, seen by some as harmful to the environment, started slowly more than a decade ago, but with 24 states, including California, banning bullets made of the soft, heavy metal. The lead bullet's epitaph was already being written when the federal government finished it off. Reported by Fox News.
From the Associated Press, a man has doused himself with gasoline and set himself on fire in St. Peter's Square in Vatican City. The Vatican said this morning the 51-year-old man was treated at a nearby hospital and transferred to a larger one with serious burns to his upper body. A Vatican statement says a Jesuit priest initially tried to smother the flames with a jacket. He was later joined by 2 police officers who used a fire extinguisher to put out the blaze. The agents were treated at the hospital for smoke inhalation and injuries to their hands. The Vatican says his motives were not known. The man had a piece of paper with a phone number of his daughter on it. Vatican police refused to let reporters into the square after the incident.
If everyone over the age of 50 ate an apple a day, 8,500 deaths from heart attacks and strokes could be avoided every year in the UK. Apples would give a similar boost to cardiovascular health as medicines, such as statins, yet carry none of the side effects. This is according to the University of Oxford researchers. They base their assumptions on modeling, not direct scientific study. Any fruit should work, but getting people to comply could be challenging. It just shows how effective small changes in diet can be, and that both drugs and healthier living can make a real difference in preventing heart disease and stroke. More than 2/3 of adults do not eat the recommended 5 portions of fruit and vegetables a day, and this is according to a survey. This is reported by the BBC.
Getting an apple.
Yeah, exactly.
From the Associated Press, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reports that a truck was hauling 40,000 pounds of hams this morning around 4 a.m. when it overturned, spilling its cargo of ham south of Atlanta. Authorities were working early this morning to clear the ramp from Old National Highway to Interstate 85 southbound after the crash. The cab of the truck was destroyed in the crash, which also caused a diesel fuel spill. Truck driver Rigo Vargas said he was hauling the hams to Texas when he wrecked. He said he banged his head against the door when the rig flipped over, but he was not seriously hurt. So ham all over the road.
Oh, wow. Federal Reserve.
That's a traffic ham, Robin.
It is. Federal Reserve officials decided yesterday to start gradually reducing their massive economic stimulus program. Beginning in January, the Fed will buy $75 billion in bonds each month, down from the $85 billion it had been buying since September of 2012. This is a quote from a statement released by the Fed. In light of the cumulative progress toward maximum employment and the improvement in the outlook for labor market conditions, the committee decided to modestly reduce the pace of its asset purchases. The Fed decided to cut back on both types of bond purchases, mortgage-backed securities and treasuries, by $5 billion per month each, reported by CNN.
And the next story is from the Washington Times. Barbara Walters admitted on a broadcast appearance with Piers Morgan that maybe Christmas wasn't the time to say it, but it's true. The media regarded President Obama as the, quote, next Messiah, unquote, because of his promises and policies. He made so many promises, she said, that we thought that he was going to be, I shouldn't say this at Christmas time, but the next Messiah. And the whole Obamacare, or whatever you want to call it, that Affordable Health Care Act, it just hasn't worked for him, and he stumbled around on it, and people feel very disappointed because they expected more, unquote. The entire quote, by the way, was from Barbara Walters, as reported by the Washington Times.
20th Century Fox has announced the official name of its new theme park. It is set to open in Malaysia in 2016. It will be called 20th Century Fox World. Attractions will include more than 25 rides and activities on more than 25 acres of land. There will be thrill rides, dark rides, children's rides, and water rides. Some rides will be based on 20th Century Fox blockbusters such as Ice Age, Rio, Alien vs. Predator, Planet of the Apes, and Night at the Museum.
The next story comes from CBS. Consumers worried that tight deadlines around the holidays are lingering computer problems could thwart their efforts to secure coverage under President Barack Obama's health overhaul will get extra time to pay, according to the health insurance industry in a statement issued yesterday. The board of the industry's biggest trade group, America's Health Insurance Plans, said consumers who select a plan by December 23rd will now have until January 10th to pay their first month's premium instead of a previous New Year's Eve deadline set by the government. For coverage to take effect, consumers must make sure they pay their initial premium on time.
A Senate panel has approved a bill that would allow the U.S. to restore its full aid relationship with Egypt. Wider congressional support for the measure is unclear. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee's bill passed yesterday softens the American ban on assistance to governments suffering coup d'etat. It allows the president to waive the restriction for up to a year on national security grounds. For Egypt specifically, President Barack Obama has a waiver option through September of 2015. However, the bill requires the administration to make a coup determination within 30 days of a questionable government change. Obama's aides avoided such a decision after the Egyptian army's July overthrow of the country's Islamist president, citing the risk to important military programs, reported by the Las Vegas Sun.
And the next story is also from the Washington Times. Congress passed a new top-line budget yesterday, sending it to President Obama's desk for his signature and signaling all sides in Washington are trying to avoid another government shutdown in January. The budget deal passed by a 64-36 vote, with 9 Republicans joining all Democrats. It passed the House last week by a bipartisan 332-94 vote, where the majority of both parties supported the plan. The two-year $1.012 trillion deal, written by Senator Patty Murray, a Washington Democrat, and Representative Paul Ryan, a Wisconsin Republican, increases spending in the short term in exchange for fee hikes and increased pension payments for federal workers in later years. The extra money up front will be used to alleviate some of the budget sequester cuts.
U.S. government scientists have for the first time connected the BP oil disaster to dolphin deaths in the Gulf of Mexico in a study finding direct evidence of toxic exposure. The study, led by scientists from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, found lung disease, hormonal abnormalities, and other health effects among dolphins in an area heavily oiled during the BP spill. The diseases found in the dolphins at Batteria Bay in Louisiana, though rare, were consistent with exposure to oil. Many disease conditions observed in Batteria Bay dolphins are uncommon but consistent with petroleum hydrocarbon exposure and toxicity, reported by The Guardian.
And this next story from the New York Daily News, a cat fight erupted in the courthouse yesterday when soccer mom, Madam Anna Gristina, accused her hooker Booker of betraying her to prosecutors. She said, Gristina yelled at Janie Mae Baker, quote, "Jane, you broke my heart." She said the latter, Baker, copped a plea to a misdemeanor promoting prostitution charge to avoid jail. "You broke my heart, Jane," she said, her voice breaking. Gristina trailed Baker through the Manhattan Supreme Court corridor into an elevator. "You interacted with my family, my children, my animal rescue." According to the statement, "How could you?" Baker, a glamorous blonde dressed to the nines in tight black jeans and a gray tweed jacket, had managed to keep her composure until then. But with those words, Baker finally rounded on her former friend. "I didn't betray you," Baker whispered and climbed into the elevator. Gristina, dressed in a mink coat, jeans, and the tan Ugg boots, seemingly couldn't comprehend and began bawling. What the heck story is that?
Yeah, exactly.
What the heck kind of a story is that? Okay, never mind. New York Daily News is where I got it from if you want to look it up more.
To mark International Migrants Day, the United Nations family is calling on people and governments everywhere to reject xenophobia and embrace migration as a key enabler for equitable, inclusive, and sustainable social and economic development. This is a quote from Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. "Let us make migration work for the benefit of migrants and countries alike. We owe this to the millions of migrants who, through their courage, vitality, and dreams, help make our societies more prosperous, resilient, and diverse," reported by UN News.
And this from the ABC News Agency. John Podesta has not started yet in his new position as a senior advisor to President Obama, but he is already finding himself in hot water with Republicans. Podesta, President Bill Clinton's former chief of staff and chair of the Center for American Progress, is quoted in a Politico profile comparing House Republicans to the followers of Jim Jones, the group that infamously murdered 5 people, including a U.S. congressman, before committing one of the largest mass suicides in history back in 1978. The Obama administration, need to focus on executive action given that they are facing a second term against a cult worthy of Jonestown in charge of one of the houses of Congress. That was a quote from Podesta in the interview he granted to Politico earlier this fall. There you go.
This is a story from the Florida News Network. It's out of Longwood. Florida wildlife officers have identified the bear that attacked a Longwood, Florida woman earlier this month. Officers say DNA testing positively identified the bear that was captured December the 9th as the one that attacked and injured Susan Chalfant as she walked her dogs in the Longwood neighborhood a week before. Wildlife officers say the bear involved in the attack and 2 of her 3 cubs were captured. Busch Gardens in Tampa will take the bear and her cubs until the cubs are able to be released into the wild in the spring. Wildlife workers are continuing to monitor the Central Florida community of Longwood for signs of the 3rd cub. Meanwhile, 2 other bears were trapped while wildlife officers searched for the bear responsible for the attack. Those bears were euthanized. Wow.
And from CNS News, the average price for a pound of ground beef hit its all-time high in the United States in November, according to data released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. In January of 1980, when the Bureau of Labor Statistics started tracking the average price of 100% beef ground chuck, a pound cost $1.82. By this November, the same pound of ground beef cost $3.61 per pound. That was up from $3.49 per pound just 1 month earlier. A decade ago, in November of 2003, a pound of ground chuck cost $2.49. Since then, the price has gone up 45%. Despite the increase in the average cost of ground beef, the Consumer Price Index remained unchanged in November, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Many detainees at Guantanamo Bay may be closer to heading home under a bipartisan deal reached in Congress that gives President Barack Obama a rare victory in his fight to close the prison. The compromise is part of a broad defense bill awaiting final passage in the Senate this week. It's the first time since Obama came to office promising to close Guantanamo that Congress is moving to ease transfer restrictions instead of strengthening them. But even with the deal, Obama still faces big obstacles to closing Guantanamo. The administration also pushed for the ability to transfer detainees to the U.S. for detention, trial, or medical emergencies, but Obama lost on that front, reported by the Las Vegas Sun.
The next story comes from the Associated Press. It's a smoke and mirrors saga fit for Hollywood, complete with a major movie star, murky reports of a kidnapping, and an American fugitive sneaking across the border of a nation unfriendly to the United States. Little is being revealed about Jacob Ostreicher's flight from house arrest in Bolivia and into the care of actor and activist Sean Penn. The New York businessman arrived in the U.S. on Monday after an ordeal that began more than 2 years ago when he was jailed as part of a money laundering probe into a rice growing venture. His Orthodox Jewish family associated in Bolivia and the United States State Department are all expressing a mixture of relief and surprise and not much else. No one is saying how the 54-year-old was able to escape. You'll never find out. Peter Hagen, president emeritus of the Inter-American Dialogue in Washington, said on Tuesday, if the U.S. is involved, it was done through layers and layers of cover, he said. Sean Penn, the actor who last year traveled to La Paz and directly appealed to President Evo Morales to free Ostreicher, said a humanitarian operation had been mounted to extract the American from the corrupt prosecution and imprisonment he was suffering, but his statement in an email to the Associated Press gave no details on how that was done.
The United States is to provide nearly $25 million in additional humanitarian aid to help the Philippines deal with the devastation wrought by Typhoon Haiyan last month. This is according to U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. He was touring the worst-hit region. Kerry flew to Tacloban City, where he visited a food distribution center and spoke with officials and survivors. This is a quote from Kerry. "This is a devastation unlike anything that I have ever seen at this scale. It is really quite stunning. It looks like a war zone, and to many people it is," reported by The Guardian.
And that's all the time we have for NewsBites. If you would like to sponsor that segment of AM Ocala Live or any segment on WOCA, including Veterans News, which is coming up next, give us a call, 732-8000, and speak to one of our sales representatives. They'll explain to you how it's done and how you can get your ad in the portion of the day that you want to support. And, of course, our end on this deal is to send some business your way. We'll tell your customers about you so they go to see you, find out about your sales, and we work together to make your business successful as well as ours. The segment you just heard is every weekday morning from about 8:35 till 9 o'clock. Robin, how many stories did we squeeze in today?
26.
26?
Yeah.
That's almost the record, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think 27 is our record,
28.
right? 28, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, we will push forward right now. We'll take a little break in Veterans News with Hank Whittier is up next. We'll be right back.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA. Ocala.
ABC News Now. I'm Karen Chase. Target is dealing with a holiday security nightmare. The credit and debit card numbers of as many as 40 million customers may have been stolen since Black Friday by criminals who attach devices to card swipers in stores. The Secret Service is investigating it as a financial security threat. Facebook is testing the loyalty of its friends by inserting pop-up video ads into news.